IMS is used by many of the top Fortune 1000 companies worldwide. Collectively, these companies process more than 50 billion transactions per day in IMS. Business leaders are innovating with IMS Systems of Record in areas such as cloud and mobile, analytics, SOA, and modern user interfaces and tools. The focus of this video is cloud and integrating new applications with systems of record data. The following demo will show that with Bluemix you can simply and securely connect to core IT and even other clouds. The millennial developer now expects to be able to deploy updates to their applications in seconds, to write their code in whichever tool or language they choose, to be able to continually integrate working copies of code into a shared mainline, to focus on writing the code and not on the administration of servers, virtualization, operating systems, and middleware, to fail fast or ensure applications fail immediately and visibly to speed debugging and fixes, and to integrate useful APIs into their applications. Mobile devices tend to use standard protocols and standard data format packaging, REST and JSON, and some z/OS systems do not accept these formats. Mobile developers can't easily find z/OS services, but now they can, with Websphere Liberty z/OS Connect. z/OS Connect is designed to be a REST JSON interface to a z/OS LPAR. There is no charge for z/OS Connect. It is supplied as part of a license entitlement to WAS, z/OS, CICS, or IMS. You can support innovation on the mainframe with mobile workload pricing and achieve up to 60% reduction in incremental growth from mobile transactions. We have lots of demos and solutions to support cloud and mobile on IMS. Today, Kevin is going to show you how a popular JavaScript runtime platform, Node.js, invokes IMS RESTful services, and explore how a service can invoke IMS transactions, take a working application, and easily publish it to IBM Bluemix.
Hey everybody, my name is Kevin Height and I work with IMS. And recently I've been working with a product called IBM z/OS Connect. And z/OS Connect's mission is really to expose various z/OS mainframe assets as RESTful services for external consumption outside of the mainframe. And so various products plug into z/OS Connect and allow you to expose those products services, those products assets as services. And IMS is one of those products that fits in with z/OS Connect here. And IMS basically is allowing you to expose your IMS transactions as a RESTful service so that you can use them in various applications, whether it's a mobile application, JavaScript, some sort of cloud-based application. So in general, this whole presentation is to give you an overview of how you would take an existing IMS transaction and expose it as a RESTful service. And to do this, we'll need a couple things. First is z/OS Connect with the IMS Mobile Feature Pack configured. The next thing we'll need is IMS Explorer for Development, which is Eclipse-based tooling that you're going to use to actually manage and deploy the various pieces that you need into z/OS Connect. It's kind of like a management console for z/OS Connect. And then after we configure some services and test those services out using Explorer for Development, we're also going to use to modify a Node.js JavaScript application, which basically acts as a web application to manage contacts or a phone book directory. And then once we have that application working with our new services, we're going to take that application and push that up to IBM's cloud platform, which is called IBM Bluemix. So here's again kind of a pictorial view of what I just described. So on the back end, we've got an IMS version 13 system running some existing transactions. Those transactions are basically a phone book transaction that you can do things like insert a new phone book record, delete a phone book record, update, or just browse. In front of IMS Connect, you'll have z/OS Connect sitting there. Again, that's a Websphere Liberty-based server, and that is housing your RESTful services and the necessary artifacts and connection properties and profiles to actually expose your IMS transaction as a RESTful service. And then after that, again, we're going to modify a JavaScript-based application and get that running locally on the workstation. And then once we do that, we'll push that application out to the cloud into IBM Bluemix. So the first component I'll give you an overview on is ZOS Connect and the IMS Mobile Feature Pack. ZOS Connect is a Websphere Liberty-based gateway that provides secure and simple way to discover and call into application assets on ZOS. So today, ZOS Connect supports calling into IMS Transactions as well as Kix Transactions, and they're looking to expand that into other areas as well. But in addition to being able to expose your assets as RESTful services, ZOS Connect also provides the security on the front end, so you can either use SAF-based security and hook it up to either RACF or whatever your existing security infrastructure is, or you can use Websphere-based security like basic registry or hook into LDAP. So there's different options available for that. So ZOS Connect is basically the front end that allows you to take your RESTful input, which is usually a JSON object, and then it passes that back to a backend adapter. And in our case, in the case of IMS, the IMS Mobile Feature Pack provides that adapter support to take that RESTful input and convert it into the binary payload that IMS expects for that given transaction. So on this next slide, you can see here's an example of a JSON input at the top. And in this case, we have we're passing in a first name, a last name, an extension, and a zip code. And we're using some metadata about that basically helps us map this JSON input to a binary payload. And then the same thing happens on output when IMS responds to the transaction invocation and sends out a binary payload. We will convert it back into the appropriate output JSON format. So in order to get that metadata about the message into ZOS Connect and deploy that RESTful service, the IMS Explorer for Development, which is an Eclipse-based tool, now provides support for the IMS Mobile Feature Pack, and basically allows you to take and import your COBOL or PL1 copybook structures and deploy those and bind those to a RESTful service so that service knows how to transform and send messages to and from IMS. So Node.js is basically the application runtime that we're going to be using to run our JavaScript application. And really we're writing a JavaScript server to basically host a web page to manage like a phone book or a contacts directory. And Node.js is basically a very lightweight JavaScript engine. IBM now ships its own implementation of Node.js, and that's available now if you search IBM's website. So once we complete the Node.js application locally on our workstation, we're going to actually then push that application out to the cloud, and in this case we're pushing it to IBM's Bluemix, which is an open standard cloud-based platform for managing and building and running applications of all types, including Java and Node.js. And so really, IBM Bluemix is what we call platform as a service, and it basically sits on top of SoftLayer, which is infrastructure as a service, and these layers basically work together to help provision hardware, how much memory, how many server instances you need, things like that to make the management and deployment of your applications very simple. So a high-level overview of what we're going to be doing here is we're going to actually connect up to a ZOS Connect that's available on a demo system, and we're going to actually first make a connection from our workstation using IMS Explorer for Development to ZOS Connect. Then from that tooling, we're going to actually start deploying artifacts, and some of the artifacts include connection profiles, and these connection profiles describe how ZOS Connect should connect to IMS Connect on the IMS Connect on the back end. The next thing we're going to deploy is a IMS interaction property profile, and that basically tells how to invoke the transaction. IMS has various commit modes and sync levels, and so depending if you want to receive the message back to the application before that application or that actual transaction gets committed, there's certain options for that, and so this is where you would specify those types of things. Next we have the message metadata. This is where you actually import those COBOL. You're going to import your COBOL copybooks and PL1 structures into IMS Explorer for Development, and IMS Explorer for Development will push that information out to the ZOS Connect so that it has that information on hand. And the last thing we're going to do here is then bind a service, in this case an add contact service, to those three different things, the connection. So this service will be bound to this connection, it'll use these types of transaction interaction properties, and then this message metadata to do conversion of the JSON and binary payloads. And once we do that, we're also going to use IMS Explorer for Development's service testing feature to actually attempt to run the newly deployed add contact service just to validate that everything runs properly. Once we know our services work, we'll then start stitching that service into the JavaScript, this web application, and there's already a template out there that I've started on, and so we'll just have to fill in a few things there. And then once we have a working Node.js application, we'll be able to push that up to Bluemix and see that run, and that's when you're making that application, you know, publicly available and pushing that out to the world. So before I get into the demo, I just wanted to mention this is, even though this is a new server, it's something we put a lot of thought in and a lot of thought into how well it's going to perform. And so far we've benchmarked and it's achieving over 34,000 transactions per second on IMS. So this is fantastic, and we actually have a performance report available at this link, and so feel free to go out and take a look at that. Alright, so let's get on to the demo now. The first thing that you'll need is an IMS Explorer for Development to actually connect to your backend ZOS Connect system. If you don't already have IMS Explorer for Development, I'll just show you quickly how you can get to the download page. If you go to ibm.com/IMS, you'll go to the Products tab and IMS Enterprise Suite, and then IMS Enterprise Suite Explorer for Development. And then finally there'll be a Downloads tab up here, and you can follow the instructions for logging in with your IBM external ID. And then finally you're going to select Enterprise Suite, whatever the latest version is at the time you're doing this. And then again, you can select from various versions, but you'll want to make sure you select IMS Explorer for Development. And then you can go ahead and continue and agree and download from there. So I'm going to go ahead now and launch the IMS Explorer for Development, and that's going to be under IMS Enterprise Suite Explorer for Development, and I'm going to click on this here. So you can choose where you want your workspace to be. I generally just take the default. If you're not familiar with Eclipse, Eclipse gives you various perspectives, and each perspective kind of lays out the whole workspace a little bit differently depending on what type of task you're doing at the time. And in order to work with ZOS Connect and the IMS Mobile Feature Pack, we're going to want to be in the IMS Mobile perspective. So if you don't see IMS Mobile here to begin with, what you're going to want to do is go to Window, Open Perspective, Other, and then you're just going to go down and find IMS Mobile. So if we click that, we now get a little bit different layout here, and the first thing we're going to do is actually make that connection to a backend ZOS Connect server. So I'm going to punch in a name for this. I'll just call it ZOS Server, and I'm going to put in the host name, and as well as the port number for this server. And then you can give it a username. And so once you connect to this, you'll actually see that there's several folders here, connection profiles, IMS interaction property profiles, and services. And then down here you'll also see something called gateway servers in this transaction navigator. And this basically tells you which transactions you actually have metadata for. And so the first thing I want to do is actually create, import a COBOL copybook that represents the input and output messages for my particular transaction. So I'm going to right click here and say create. I'm going to define a transaction. This is all of these interactions that we'll be doing is actually pushing and pulling data from ZOS Connect. So none of this information is stored locally on your workstation. It's all being synchronized with the server. So my transaction name in this case is going to be IVTNO07. And once you create a define a transaction here, you're actually going to be able to import data structures into that. And so the way you do that, you can either choose from a remote file system, and this will let you FTP your COBOL copybooks down to your system, or you can use a local file system if you've already manually FTP'd them down to your system, and that's what I did in our case. And then I'm going to go ahead and navigate. You can either browse and navigate to the folder and then select your copybook. And it's going to go ahead and parse out that copybook, and you're going to tell it, if there's multiple structures in that copybook, you're going to tell it which ones you want to import. So in this case, I want to import for my input this IVTNO input, and I'm going to add that to my import list down here. And then I also want to import the output message structure as well. And so that's, I'm going to map to the output message name, and I'm going to add that to the list here as well. And so I'm going to click Finish, and what you'll see now is that under Input, we can see we've imported this data structure. Now, all IMS transactions have this length field, or this LL field, and then a ZZ field, which is used internally by IMS, and then a tran code, and then now it gets to the actual transaction specific input fields, like the command being used. In our case, for this phone book transaction, you can either add a new phone book record, display a phone book record, update or delete, and then you can provide the various input for those various commands. From an output perspective, it looks very similar. We have what command was used, and then any output that applies to that command. So you can see up here that there's an asterisk, and that means it's unsaved. So when we save it, this actually is going to push this back into the ZOS Connect server. So now we actually have message metadata sitting out on the server. Just for some additional perspective, what we just did was import this COBOL copybook, and again, it contains 3 different O1 levels, or 3 different copybook structures. And what we did was we imported this COBOL copybook structure and this COBOL input copybook structure, and that's basically telling us what the data types are, how long they are, and things like that. All the important things that we need to know in order to convert from a JSON input to this binary payload, and from the binary payload output back to a JSON structure. So I just wanted to jump over and show you this within a copybook to give you some perspective there. The next thing we're going to do here is actually create an IMS connection profile. So you can see here there's several connection profiles that already exist. If you want to bind your service to an existing connection profile, that's completely fine. You can actually share connections and interaction profiles amongst various services because everything's pretty loosely coupled until you bind them to a service. But in this case, I'm going to actually show you how to create a new connection profile. And this basically provides a connection between your ZOS Connect server and your IMS Connect and your IMS system. And so the first thing I'm going to do is right click on the connection profiles folder and say create an IMS connection profile. And what I'm going to put in here is I'm just going to give it a name, and I'm going to give the first part of the name IMSD, which is my IMS ID, and then I'm going to call it connection 07 just for demo purposes. Next thing I'm going to give it is the IP address of where my IMS Connect is sitting. And in this case, I'm using 127.0.0.1, which is just a loopback address because the ZOS Connect and IMS Connect are both sitting on the same LPARs. Then I'm going to just plug in the port number that this IMS Connect is listening on and just click Finish. And then you can see it just gets populated here. Again, once I clicked Finish, it actually pushed that connection profile out to the ZOS Connect server, so everything's currently deployed on the server. The next thing we can do is create a new IMS interaction profile. And so we can right-click this interaction properties folder and create a new interaction properties profile. And so here I'm just going to call it TM Interaction 07, and my destination name is going to be my IMS ID. And so that's going to be IMSD. And then you can again choose commit modes and sync levels that are appropriate for your transaction. I'm just going to keep the defaults here. And again, if you want on any of these artifacts, whether it's a connection, interaction profile, or a service, you can actually give detailed business descriptions of each of those so that others who are deploying other services or other properties can actually see what already exists out there and can either reuse them or at least know how to use them. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually create our actual RESTful services for our transaction. So I want to create two RESTful services. One is going to be add contacts and one is going to be browse contacts, and then we're going to actually test those services out as well. But first let's actually open up the services folder. You can see we've already got plenty of services out there. A lot of them are duplicates, again for demo purposes. But what we'll do is right click the services folder and create an IMS Mobile Transaction service. And then that's going to pop up this new service wizard page here. So the first thing we'll do is give the service a name. I'm going to say add contacts 07. And right now the only service type we support in ZOS Connect is a RESTful service. At some point in the future we may extend this to SOAP services and other services, but for now it's a REST service. The next thing we're going to do is associate this service with one of those tran codes that we defined down in this transaction navigator before. So in our case we defined IVTNO07. And then again, you remember when we imported those COBOL copybook structures, it automatically syncs up and knows which copybook structures are available. If there's more than one copybook structure, you'll have a list in these drop-down boxes as an option of what to select. So you're going to hit OK, and that'll populate us here. And then we're going to select our TM interaction on how we want this service to interact with IMS. And then we can select one or many connection profiles. In our case, I just want to select one of them, and I can multi-select the others and remove them. But if you do have more than one connection here, it'll actually round robin between each of the connections, or if one of them's failing, it'll go to the others. So it's kind of really helpful from a recovery perspective, and distributing the workload between multiple IMS Connect instances. If we hit next, here's where things get a little bit more powerful. Generally, when you invoke an IMS transaction, you have to provide the length of the message and a transaction code. And so in this case, our transaction code is IVTNO07. But we really don't have to expose this as a field to the external REST consumer, the service consumer. We can actually uncheck this and hide that field from them, so that they don't have to have any knowledge of the trend code at all. They don't even want to know that they're going to IMS. They just want to invoke some generic service that's going to give them some specific information. The other field we're going to hide is one that's specific to this application, which is the in command. Since we know this service is only going to be doing adds, we can say that the input command is really only going to be add all the time. And because adding a new contact to this phone book database requires a last name, first name, extension, and zip code, we're going to leave these all as checked, which means they're required fields for the service input. We're going to do a similar exercise for the output. In this case, we really want to know what the message is. This tells us if the add of that contact was successful or not. The command we really don't care to get a response back out on, and we also don't need any feedback because we know exactly what we just inserted. So really all we really need to know is, was it successful or not? And again, we can add some business description to this service. This service adds a new contact to the IMS phone book database. And then we're going to finish. And again, this pushes out, and you can see now that there's an add contacts 07. So before we go and create the new browse contact service, let's actually use IMS Explorer for development to test this the service we just created. So you can right click on the specific service and say create a test case. And that's going to allow us to either create a new project to test in, or you can add to an existing project. But for this purpose, I'm going to actually create a new project. Test services, I'll call it. And you can say again which service name you want and what the name of your test case is going to be. Add contacts 07. And then click finish. Alright, so now we're going to actually provide some values for this test case. You can see here the required input fields. You'll notice that they hid the fields that we unchecked. And so now we're going to pick some names to input here. So I'm going to add height 1 since there's already a height in the database, and Kevin, and then give myself an extension and a zip code here. And then once you're done here, all you have to do is save this. And then in order to run this test case, you're going to go to Run Configurations, select IMS Transactions, and add a new launch configuration here. We'll name that launch configuration IMS Service, and we're going to select the server that we want to test against, and that's going to be the ZOS server that we created earlier. And in the Project tab, we're going to select our test service project, and we're going to hit Apply and Run. And so here we're able to see here's our input values, and all we have to really do is click Run to run this input. And so on the output, you can see the addition of addition of entry has failed. This generally is because this already exists in the database, so that's generally not a problem. But if we change this again to height 2, for whatever reason, this database was created with the last name as the primary key. So if we run this again, entry was added, so that's what we want to see. So we'll hit close on this. Now that we know add contacts is successfully working, we can close that. And now the next thing we're going to do is switch over to the IMS Navigator, Gateway Navigator tab and add our next service, which is the Browse Contacts. So again, we do that by right-clicking Services and create new IMS Transaction service. And here we're going to add a new service called Browse Contact 07. And again, we're going to select our transaction name, IVTNO07, and then select our input and output messages that apply to this service, and click OK. And again, it's going to pre-populate or populate this. We're going to select the interaction that we want to use. We'll stick with our TM interaction 07, and we'll also stick with the connection profile that we created, IMS DCon 07. We'll go to the next tab, and similarly, we'll want to hide the transaction field, but always have it hard-coded to IVTNO07, and we'll unselect that. And then for the command, instead of add, now we're going to use the display keyword because this is that's what the program expects when you want to display a specific contact. Now the input to display doesn't require all of these fields. It really only requires last name to be input. So we can uncheck these and make last name the only required input to the browse service. And on the output, we've got out message, and in this case we do actually want to see the last name, first name, extension, and zip code of the contact that we want to display. And so we'll hide all the others. And then again, we can optionally add a business description, but otherwise just finish. And we've got Browse Contact 07 here. So we can right click this and say create a test case for our browse service, and we'll actually go back and see if that last name of height 02 or height 2 gets returned. So we're going to add this test case to an existing test project called test service, which is the one we created earlier. And we'll call this Browse Contact 07 and finish. And again here, we're going to just pre-populate the value we want to test with and hit OK. And just like before, we'll go to Run Configurations, select our IMS service launch configuration that we configured before, and just click Run. And now you can select between add or browse, and this time I just want to browse. And when we select that, this should change here. And we're going to say height 2, and then click Run. And so now height 2, you can see output was entry was displayed. You can see height 2, Kevin, and the extension and zip that we added before. So it looks like both of these services are now deployed. It's as easy as that. And now we can actually start wiring this together in our application. So I'm going to switch over now to a text editor here with our JavaScript application. And I'll show you just a couple of the important things in this application as to how you might go about invoking a REST service. So this is very simplified as an example, but it should get the point across. So the first thing we're doing is requiring this HTTPS module, which is a Node npm module, and that's getting assigned to this HTTPS variable. If you're not familiar with JavaScript, it's similar to an import or requires. But the other information we're going to need here are the ZOS Connect host or IP address. So I'm going to type that in here. And I'm also going to type in the port number for that ZOS Connect server. I'm also going to provide the user ID that we need to use and the password to actually invoke a service. And then then I have these variables with various service names. So I've already have this hooked up to an update contact service, a delete service, and then a show 50 contact service, which basically returns lists of 50 users at a time per service invocation. But we want to add the services that we just created, which was browse contact 07 and then add contact 07. And we'll scroll down here a bit, and the next thing I'll show you is how we can actually make a ZOS Connect call. In order to make a call, you're going to actually issue an HTTP put request to a specific ZOS Connect URI. And a URI is basically like a URL that contains some specific format. So it needs to be the host name plus ZOS Connect services, then the service name that we're interested in invoking, with a question mark action equals invoke. And if you issue a put command to that URL, you're going to actually go and invoke that service. We also include headers, which 64-bit encode, or base 64 encode our username and password, and then let the server know that we're going to be sending in JSON input. Then we take those options that we just set up and pass them into this HTTPS request. And so it's kind of as simple as that. And then you're just going to have a handler to handle any errors and handle data, and then handle when you've finished your request. I'm going to scroll down further because down here I've set up how to format the actual JSON input. Now, back when we were using IMS Explorer to test, you just entered values in the field and you really didn't see the JSON. So here's where I'm going to show you, this is what the JSON is going to look like that we actually send into ZOS Connect. And so it's a curly bracket with the name of our message structure, followed by a curly bracket with the first name, last name, extension, and zip code. And in this case, we put variables for the actual values of those variables. And so this is the input for the add service. And then down here a little bit more, we have input for the browse service, which again, we're just inputting the last name to retrieve information from that last name. So now that I've filled in those few extra things, I can save that. And then I can actually go to a command line and test this application out. So the first thing I'm going to do is cd into my application. And then from this application, I can, from the directory where all my application files are stored, I can actually say npm space start, and that starts up my JavaScript server. And I'm going to open Firefox and just show you localhost, and my server is configured to start on port 3001. Here's basically the output of that server, and you can see here that the contact that I added during my test was height2, and you can see that here. If I click on this, we're actually under the covers driving a browse service. So we're using that browse contacts 07. Then I can do things like update these, and that drives the update service, which was already deployed, or I could drive a delete. Or at the bottom of this initial page, I can add a brand new contact. So again, I can say Kevin, add height 3. Then select Submit, and we should have that added to the contacts. So if we view list again, we should now have a height 3, which is right here. So it looks like the application's working. All of our services, we've got 5 different services going through ZOS Connect to make this application happen. Alright, so next I am going to show you how to push this Node.js application out to IBM Bluemix. But before I go ahead and push it out there, I'll first just show you the web dashboard that Bluemix provides to see what you have deployed and things like that. So Bluemix is free to try, so come out here to bluemix.net and sign up. But if you've already got an ID, simply log in. And then once you log in, the first thing you'll see is your Bluemix dashboard. So this is the Bluemix dashboard when you log in. And from here you can see that I've got a Cloud Trader _ IMS application that's already running in the cloud. If I click into this, you can see that there's 1 instances of a Liberty web server. It's using 512 megs of memory. I can increase that as demand requires. I can increase the number of server instances as demand requires. And then simply just click a button to save those changes. I can come out and restart or stop that server as needed. And you can also see which services are actually bound to this particular application. And in this case I have a SQL database bound to it, as well as Twilio, which allows you to send SMS programmatically from your application, SMS messages. So we're not going to really be dealing with this application, so let's go back to the dashboard. What I really want to do is push out a brand new application to my Bluemix account. To push the new application, I'm going to use a command line tool provided by Cloud Foundry, which Bluemix is built around, and that allows you to use the command line to push applications out to Bluemix. So the first thing I'm going to do is type cf, which is the command line utility for Cloud Foundry, and login. And it's going to ask me for my Bluemix credentials again here. I'm going to type those in. And if it prompts you for an API endpoint, you simply type https://api.ng.bluemix.net, and that is the endpoint for your Bluemix. Now it says that I'm successfully logged in, and so really now I can run one simple command to push this out to Bluemix. But before I do that, the way it pushes, it looks into this manifest.yml file for information on how to configure that application as it pushes it out to Bluemix. So I'm going to show you that file just so you have an idea of what information is provided in it. And it's pretty simple. What you want your application's name and host name to be, how many server instances you want, how much memory you want to dedicate to that application and server, and then the command to actually start up that application. And just like I started on my local workstation, you'll use the same command, npm start, to actually start it on Bluemix. So I'm going to go ahead and type cf space push, and you can see the first thing it does is it looks for this manifest YML file, and now it's going to start doing its magic. What it's doing here is provisioning all the necessary resources. It's FTPing up the files necessary for this application, and by the end of this, it'll take a minute or two, but by the end you should have a running server available. And while this is happening in the background, I'm going to flip over here. So while this is happening, you can see my IMS contacts has showed up here and you can see there's still things happening, and then ultimately it says the request state is now started, and over here you can see that this application has turned green and it's running. So now I can click into this application and simply click on this IMS-contacts URL, and it should open me up a new tab. And now I'm actually running out on Bluemix, and so this same application is now working and available for the public to use. Alright, that about wraps up the demo here, but I just wanted to do a really quick visual recap again, just stating that we took an existing IMS transaction asset and exposed that as a RESTful service inside of z/OS Connect, and we did that using IMS Explorer for development. And we also used that tooling to test the services before exposing those to the application developers. And then switching over to the application side, we're able to easily now consume an IMS transaction without even knowing it was an IMS transaction. We just invoked a simple RESTful service, and then once that application was stable and ready, we were able to push that out to the cloud into IBM Bluemix for the masses to consume that application. So again, z/OS Connect is a great way to take your existing z/OS resources like IMS transactions and Kix transactions and expose them in a simple and secure way. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment here. We also have forums on LinkedIn and Facebook, and if you have any direct contacts with any IBM IMSers, feel free to reach out to them, and I'm sure they'll get you in touch with the right people. Thanks again.